Well, good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to another edition of Beverly's Times Past. My name is Ed Josephs, and tonight we have with us Mr. Michael Casale, longtime teacher at Beverly High School, 39 years of teaching and administering down there at Beverly High School. Mike, welcome to Times Past.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as we said earlier in programs 1 and 2, you're still at it.
Yes, I am. I do some work down at Hamilton-Wenham School District and enjoy it very much.
Before you know it, Mike, you'll be on for 50 years.
Getting close.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you may have remembered, we've had Mike on 2 programs in previous times, and we've gone through Beverly with a series of old Beverly postal cards, all belonging to Mike's collection. Mike, would you tell us a little bit about your collection in terms of its size and its origin?
Well, the collection is I probably have over 100 postcards of old Beverly. Postcards that were popular probably from late 1880s through 1920. And I began collecting these when I was teaching United States history at Beverly High School. Occasionally a student would do a project and they would bring in a picture and they'd say, well, here, you keep the picture. And then before long it was yard sales, antique shops, and so on. And so I began filling up a shoebox, and so now I have this collection of Beverly at the turn of the century, about 100 years ago. And
you were also telling me that you have a collection of out-of-town photographs?
Yes.
Postcards?
That's in the other shoebox. Mostly throughout New England. South Shore, New York, Niagara Falls, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And I have those all categorized. And it's a lot of fun to just look at them and see what times were in the past.
What a delightful way to look back 100 years, Mike, and see how the various towns, what they look like, and
yes,
what was going on in those days.
That's right, what they look like and how they've changed, and whether you think the change is for the better or not.
Yeah. And some of the photographs or the postal cards, of course, they all have identification. And we were talking at one time, mentioning that so many times those old photographs are without identification, which makes them, it's a very frustrating thing to look at them and not knowing what you're seeing there.
That's true. At the time when postcards were popular, and I think we mentioned this once before, a lot of them were manufactured in Germany. And it was quite the popular thing to do, to get a postcard no matter where you went, whether it was even on a day trip. And these postcards were always labeled. Usually on the side where the message or the address would be an identification. So it does make it a lot easier to know exactly what you're looking at.
Right. Well, let's take a quick review of programs 1 and 2, shall we? And
sure.
Kind of give us some spots that we hit during those 2 shows.
I guess the easiest way to start would be down by the Beverly-Salem Bridge, Veterans Memorial Bridge. And we started there. We took a look at the old bridge, and we have some pictures of the new bridge. And we worked our way down Cabot Street, and we went by Cabot and Edwards and moved our way down Cabot Street toward the Cabot House, the Historical Society, and further on down to the Oddfellows Building and City Hall, Andrew Cabot Mansion. And we photographed and took pictures and saw postcards of the Baptist Church, the Unitarian Church, St. Mary's Church, and different views of the several buildings on Cabot Street, the Rogers Building, the corner of Cabot and Bow, where all the activity was on Saturday nights. And we continued working our way down through the old burial ground. And we went down to Lothrop Street toward Independence Park, worked our way down toward Dane Street Beach, and eventually found our way into Lynch Park. And I think at Lynch Park is about where we ended up on our second program.
Right. And we're about to look at a photograph, Mike, of the Taft family as our first offering for the evening.
President Taft spent 3 summers in Beverly, and Beverly was this place for the summer White House. And that first photograph that we see of the Taft family you have William Howard Taft, and President Taft held the two highest offices in the United States. He was President of the United States and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is really quite an honor. And he came to Beverly with his wife and family, and he married Helen Herron, and they were married in 1886. Actually, it was June 19th. And they had 3 children. Probably the one that most people would remember would be Robert Alfonso Taft, who was born in 1889. He died in 1953. Senator Taft, the Taft-Hartley Law, and so on is attributed to him. Then he had a daughter whose name was Helen Herron, named after her mother. She was born in 1891, and she died in 1987. And then Charles Phelps was born in 1897, and he died in 1983. When President Taft came to Beverly, he has a lot of firsts. He was our first golfing president. He was the first president to throw out a baseball at a baseball game on the opening day. When he used to go golfing, he golfed at Myopia. He brought 2 automobiles with him when he came to Beverly. His favorite was a Stanley steamer. He used to like to drive around a Stanley steamer, and I guess from years ago when I was talking to some of the folks that remembered him, he used to like to frequent Delaney's drugstore, and usually after a golf trip he would stop into Delaney's for some refreshment. He also was our largest president. He
looks pretty svelte in this picture here.
Yeah, he does.
He was a good-sized man.
He was. He was over 300 pounds. And he did spend his summers here in Beverly. And it must have been really quite a lot of excitement in Beverly. I know we've seen a lot of pictures of Taft dedicating the YMCA, but a lot of people don't really realize that one of the other things he did was he was at the dedication of the Edwards School at the corner of Rantoul and School Street. And I don't know whether your viewers are interested or not, but he gave a short speech in which he was praising the modern building, complete with a gymnasium and training rooms, bathtubs, which were quite frequent in the schools built at that time, because sometimes the children, they'd actually bathe the children. The lunchroom, the reception hall, he called it, which would be like an all-purpose room, which we talk about today. So he took the time to actually go to this dedication, and it must have caused quite a bit of excitement in Beverly to have the president around at that time.
Right. His office, working office, was at the corner of Federal Street and Cabot, where the National Bank is today.
Yes.
That was what they call the summer White House in those days. And like you said, he did dedicate the cornerstone at the Beverly YMCA, and there was, as we can see in the picture that we're now showing, a huge crowd that turned out that day, Mike.
That's right. And also, I have not had the opportunity to see this, but I understand that in the First Parish Church, where he used to go for Sunday services, there's a pew that has a plaque on it, I guess, that he used to use when he went there.
Yep. Good old Republican he was.
Absolutely.
Well, now where they're standing, are they not right at the foot of the Lynch Park driveway?
It seems.
On Over Street
it
there?
seems that's exactly where they are. They are standing, and as I said, the excitement that he must have caused. He even brought his presidential yacht to Beverly,
which we're going to see.
Which we're going to see in a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Of course, we know the place today is Lynch Park, but in the original version, it was called Woodbury's Point.
Yes.
In honor, I'm sure, of one of the first settlers that settled in those parts, and it later on became Burgess Point. Family by the name of Benjamin Burgess and his family purchased the land, and they in turn sold it to the Robert Evans family. And it was known also as the Evans Point at one time. And I believe that was the family that decided that the president was no longer welcome to be there after he summoned, I think, one year at Lynch Park. And they, in turn, when they died, their Mrs. Evans's sisters, by the name of Belle and Abby Hunt, were given the land, the title to the land. And when it came time for their demise, they had willed it to the Beverly Hospital, the area, the
Yes.
15 acres or so of area down there. And the Beverly Hospital decided that they could not maintain the place, and so they gave the land. They said you could have the land to the city of Beverly. I think it was $50,000. Sold the land. At just about that time, David Lynch had expired, had willed a huge sum of money to the city of Beverly for the upkeep and care of parks, recreational areas. And so they decided to use the money to turn this estate into a park. And they named it the David S. Lynch Memorial Park in honor of Mr. Lynch, and as we know it today. And it was opened in 1943 under the leadership of Mayor Daniel Chick McLean.
Chick McLean.
Yeah, it's quite a history there.
Yes.
We're going to take a look next, Mike, at the summer house, actually, of President Taft.
This, there are a lot of photographs of that house. One of the postcards actually has an insert of President Taft in the postcard, and then there are more formal pictures that you see. But basically, they all houses don't change. And this particular house eventually was moved, as you know, and was put on a barge and sailed across the harbor to Marblehead.
Where it now resides today.
It's still there.
Peaches Point, I believe,
That's
is
right.
the location of this house. And of course, we're looking at the house as it sat in those days, but right on that spot, of course, is the Rose Garden.
That's right.
As we're about to see here.
Right.
The next item.
The Rose Garden was and really is still a very popular place to visit for weddings, for family gatherings, and so on. And here we have a series of 3 different pictures of postcards of the gardens at Lynch Park. There's one of the pictures that is the Rose Garden itself. There's another one of the lilies in bloom, and then there's another postcard of the colonnade, which stood at the garden. And this is the site, probably part of the old cellar hole and the remains of where the president's house was at the time.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place in those days. It still is beautiful
Yes,
now
it is.
and attractive,
It
but
is.
in the original form and setting, Mike, it was just
Right.
delightful down there.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a look at one of the houses in the park.
Right. The Dawsons Tea Hall, and I think we probably mentioned these in our last get-together, where we had the courtyard entrance and the main entrance to the tea hall. This building was always quite popular. In the lower left-hand corner of the picture, you can see the little, looks like a little tower there, and that was one of the favorite spots of the children. I can remember climbing up into that thing, and it was just a great place to play and to hide. And the refreshment stand used to be there, and eventually the Miles McPherson Youth Center was housed there.
We used to call it the monastery, back in the
Monastery.
late 50s and early 60s, and we used it to provide rooms for special camps of retarded children down there back in those
Yes.
days. And of course the place was tragically burned down.
It was burned, that's correct, yeah.
Yeah. There were actually 3 of these houses sitting on the property at one time. One of them, of course, being up on the point.
Right.
I believe that was called Dawsons Hall, was it? At that
This was called the Dawsons Tea House.
tea house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, they had the carriage house,
The carriage house. Yep.
and then the main house, and then there was another one.
Yep. Quite a fabulous place. Now we're going to take a look at the president's yacht here.
Right, the presidential yacht. It must have been quite a sight to see this anchoring in Beverly Harbor. It was a USS gunboat, and it was called the USS Mayflower, and it was 275 feet long, had a 36-foot beam, and it had a 17-foot draft. The ship itself had about 2,600 pounds displacement. And it was built in Scotland in 1896. It saw service in the Spanish-American War, and that was in 1898. And it was ordered out of service by President Hoover May 22nd, 1929. The ship itself caught fire and it burned at League Island Navy Yard in Philadelphia, January 24th in 1931. But it must have been quite a sight. It must have been to see the presidential yacht there with Navy escort vessels and the Coast Guard. It must have been much like President Bush in Maine,
Right.
when he used to visit there. And
Right.
he didn't have the presidential yacht, but he had his cigarette boat and
Yep.
the Coast Guard guiding him and so on.
Yep.
But to have this 275-foot presidential yacht anchored right off Woodbury's Point, Burgess Point, or Lynch Park as we know it,
Yeah.
must have been quite a sight to see.
Yeah. I'm sure that privacy was at a minimum for the people that lived in that area.
That's right. That's probably one of the reasons they weren't welcome back on the other years.
Actually, to follow through with this, where he went after Lynch Park, he did find a place not far away, Mike.
Not too far away, Parramatta was the name of the building. And that building is still standing
Right.
today.
He had his friend was Mrs. Peabody, the wife of Henry Peabody, and she decided to take pity on the president apparently and offered him
Yeah.
a summer's lodging, and I
Right.
believe he stayed there for two seasons.
Yeah.
At Parramatta.
Mhm.
We're going to move a scant few yards away, Mike. For our
Yes,
next
we're going
stop.
to move over to Hospital Point. And at Hospital Point, it was originally called Paul's Head because it was the property of Paul Thorndike. And Paul Thorndike was one of the first selectmen in Beverly. And it was fortified actually during the Revolutionary War, but there was a watchtower built there in the early 1700s.
1711,
Yeah, to watch out for ships and so on. And it was the site of a smallpox hospital which was built in 1801, and the lighthouse was built in 1871. And today it's the home of the Admiral of the 1st Coast Guard District. The fortification that we had, which was during some of the wars between Britain and France, there's an area behind it which is landlocked, which is called Hannah Park, and part of the fortification was there. And the cellar holes of the barrack and so on are still right there. But these views that we have of Hospital Point here are views at night, and they're more of an artist rendering than actual photographs, I believe.
Yeah. Actually, Mike, was there not a controversy of some sort concerning that little park, that Hannah Park area?
Yes. Over the years, several of the congressmen have tried to have access or get access for the public to that park, and they've been unsuccessful. I guess mainly for the private property that abuts it and for the United States Coast Guard, which for security reasons and so on, they don't allow access to the park except once a year during homecoming.
Uh-huh.
And during homecoming in August, you can usually take a tour and walk out back into Hannah Park. And that's been something that every once in a while it crops up, and we appeal through our congressman through Washington or the Transportation Department to see if we can't get that opened up to the public.
Yeah. Actually, I'm sure they don't promote it for the very reason that you mentioned concerning the parking down there.
Yes.
They just could not accommodate
No.
people
That's true.
to be down there for a recreational purpose.
That's true.
Yeah. That and the seawall controversy, Mike, will never go away, will it?
Never, never. Always be there. If you ever run out of any arguments, you can always resurrect that one.
Right. Where's our next stop?
Next stop is we move out of Bayview Avenue and we turn right and head down toward Neptune Street, and you're looking at the junction of Neptune and Ober Streets. Really, there are some houses in the area now, but as Neptune Street comes down and turns the corner and you end up on Pickman Road, that's what you're looking at, a picture of that area around 1900. When you move out of this and you start heading into it, Beverly Cove, we moved down to a familiar site. This site hasn't changed much over the years. It's Mingo Beach Hill.
Right.
And at Mingo Beach Hill, I think probably most people in Beverly know the story of how Mingo Beach got its name. Robin Mingo was a slave, and he was the property of Thomas Woodbury. And the story gets long and involved. He ended up, he married a woman named Deborah Taylor, who was a Native American, and he was promised his freedom if the tide ever went out far enough so that he could walk out to Aunt Becky's ledge, which is a ledge sitting right out there. And that actually occurred in the year he died, and that was in 1773. But that has not changed. If you look at that postcard and you look at it today, it looks practically the same.
That's one of the more spectacular views of the ocean.
Yes,
along
it
Route
is.
127.
That's right, it is.
And it's property of Endicott College.
That's right.
At this point in time.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go still moving along here. Route 127.
We're on 127 now, and as we move down 127, we get to around number 558 Hale Street, and that's the site of the first public high school in Beverly. There's a long controversy that goes into that, and there's been a lot of writing that's gone on in different schools of education. I can think of the University of Michigan as one, and Harvard College is another. The General Court, the Great and General Court of Massachusetts, had ordered that the cities and towns over a certain population have a public high school. And Beverly was reluctant to do that. Finally, they were threatened to go to court, and they were going to be forced into building a high school. Well, the school committee decided at that point that they should have a high school, and they chose a site on Hale Street at 558. And that was in 1858. The students that attended the school, the attendance was very low. And in 1859, the school board said that because of low attendance, they were going to close the school. But as some of the argument was at the time was they put the school so far away, nobody could get there anyway. So there was a controversy over that. But that controversy has changed a little bit because there were some educators who were doing the research felt it had to do with economics. And as I say, there was this controversy over the school. Finally, the citizens of Beverly were really upset by this, and in 1860 threatened court again, so the school committee decided that they would reopen the high school. And they opened the school on the corner of Railroad Avenue and Highland Avenue, and it was the headquarters of the Oddfellows. The Oddfellows had a hall there, and they conducted classes there for 1 year. And eventually the high school kept moving. It ended up in the GAR Hall, which was situated across the street from St. Mary's Church. And then eventually money was appropriated at about the same time that we built the Oddfellows building. In fact, the builder of the Oddfellows building and the builder of Briscoe, which was the high school, were the same. It was a Joseph Williams from Beverly Farms.
We can see the similarity in the style
You
of
can
the building.
see it. You can see how the style is very similar. And so that's how the high school actually got its start. And then in 1923, we moved to our new school, which was almost called the Warren G. Harding High School. They had actually proposed that name, the Board of Aldermen. But at the last minute, the Teapot Dome scandal changed that, and they decided to keep the Beverly High School. And we stayed there till 1965, and then we moved up to our present site. The building itself that sat at 558 Hale Street now is on Front Street. That building was actually picked up and moved.
As a private home
As a,
now.
yes.
Yeah.
I think when they moved it, it started as a gift shop and now is as a private home.
Yeah. Interesting, as we mentioned, the old high school, which is now the Briscoe School, how the conditions are down there. I guess it's pretty tough shape, and it's going to take a lot of funding to get the building back in good form again.
I was reading that in the paper today. It's really, I think structurally, the building is very sound. The exterior is probably what needs work. But I spent a lot of years in that building, and I saw a lot of, in the work that I was doing in media and so on, I saw a lot of workers who were coming in. I can remember we were wiring the building for computers, wiring the building for telephones, and I saw more people burn out their drills trying to drill through that concrete that I'll tell you, it's going to take a lot to move that building. Now, the brickwork and so on the outside may need some work, but I think that basically it's a sound building.
William Caird was the contractor, Mike,
Yes.
to put that up?
And actually, Ed, the building itself caused quite a bit of controversy in Beverly because it was our first $1 million building in Beverly. And the citizens couldn't believe that we were spending $1 million for a school building.
Huh.
But that was the first $1 million building in Beverly.
Yeah. Just briefly before we leave this this subject, there was what they call a Beverly Academy, Mike, and located on the corner of Brown and Washington Streets. This began in 1835.
Yes.
And it closed in 1854, so it was just there for a brief time.
There was an academy movement actually throughout the United States at that time, at that particular time. And that was private.
Right.
It was not a public school.
Right. Then a group of people from the Lynn area got together, and they started what they call the Christian Academy up at Cherry Hill. And this only went for 2 years, 1836 to 1838. And the idea was to train young people to get into the shoe business, which
Yes.
is very prominent. In
Manual
those days.
training was very important. There was the whole school of thought and apprenticeships and journeymen and so on. And in fact, to carry that one step further, when the United Shoe moved to Beverly, they started the Beverly Industrial School, which was housed in what is now which was the high school at Alice Square. And the Beverly Industrial School actually turned into the Beverly Cooperative Trade School, which was one of the first cooperative education programs in the United States. In fact, it was called the Beverly System. And if you go to some of the schools of education libraries, you can still read on the Beverly System and how cooperative education came about. But they were very interested in apprenticeships.
Was this later to be called the Claude Patton School?
Yes.
When it was located up on Sawyer Road?
That became part of it. But the Beverly Industrial School was actually a postgraduate course.
Okay.
It would go through what we'd call grade 13, and it would end up that for 1 month the students would be doing academic work, and for 1 month they'd actually be in the United Shoe working. And that was, as we say, grade 13.
Yeah. Okay. So,